What's going on, everybody? I'm Taylor Carter and you are watching Thairabian Kitchen. Today I'm going to be showing you how to cook Thai red curry, which just so happens to be one of my very favorite things to eat, pretty much, period. And this version comes together rather quickly. It's not very difficult to make, so it's certainly not out of bounds to make as like a weeknight dinner or something like that. And it's f***ing delicious, so everybody wins. Now the first thing I'm going to do is get my rice cooking. And you can't just use any rice in this recipe, it just won't be the same. You really need to use jasmine rice, so I'm going to get that started. Now it's time to turn our attention to preparing the vegetables and the chicken, because once we start cooking, we're not going to want to fool around with cutting this stuff up. So the very first thing I'm going to cut is going to be Thai eggplant. And to be honest with you, I didn't even know these little fuckers existed until relatively recently. I was in my local Thai market, grocery store, whatever you want to call it, and I was buying all the ingredients to make a curry, and one of the employees turned me on to these, and I really like them. They're very similar in taste and texture, in my opinion, to traditional eggplant, just a very different size. They look very much like tomatillos, in my opinion, but of course they taste nothing like them. They make a great addition to curry, so I'm going to go ahead and get these things cut up. And I'm just going to cut them into bite-sized pieces. Some of the smaller ones I'm just going to cut into 4 pieces. Some of the larger ones you can cut into 6 pieces. But to keep these from turning black, you're going to want to keep them in water. All right, next up is, we'll go with red bell pepper. I'm just going to cut this into kind of sort of julienne slices. And I'm going to finish with green beans. These are in season right now. In any of these vegetables, you want something with a relatively hearty texture that's going to hold up in this curry. But I really like all 3 of these things. But if you don't, that's cool. Make it your own. Replace it with any kind of vegetable that you think would be good in this. Now, I've had this, all kinds of versions of this at different restaurants. And almost all the time they come with different vegetables. Cabbage is popular. I've had it with broccoli in there. The possibilities are endless. You just want something that's relatively hearty. Now for the chicken, I'm going to get my poultry cutting board out. And I just have chicken breast here, boneless, skinless chicken breast. It's very hard for me to get excited about boneless, skinless chicken breast, but I've made this recipe with thighs before, and for whatever reason, it comes out a little too fatty in the broth. They just render too much fat out. So it's okay to use thighs, 1, if you are okay with a fattier broth, and 2, if you blanch the thighs, probably just for a minute or 2, that would help that out a lot. but this is a good way to use boneless, skinless chicken breast, so that's what I'm going to do. I like to cut each breast. This is sort of your average size chicken breast. It's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, 7 ounces, 6, 7 ounces. I'm going to cut this thing into 3 pieces, and then I'm going to do very thin slices because this is going to actually cook in the curry. So you don't want it to be super thick, and the texture is really good if you go relatively thin with it. It's time to cook. I'm going to start by heating up a couple of tablespoons of vegetable oil, and in this case it is grapeseed oil. I'm going to add that to the pot, and I am going to add 2 tablespoons of red curry paste. This is store-bought red curry paste. This particular brand is quite delicious. Just in case you're wondering what it is, it's this brand. I've had pretty good luck finding it in my area. I'm sure you can find it on Amazon otherwise. But the first step is to go ahead, and I like to kind of heat this curry paste up. It'll start to render some of its oils, wake up some of these flavors. So that's the place to start. I've noticed that a lot of recipes actually will, instead of using a little bit of oil to get the curry paste going, will use some of the coconut milk, which I've tried in the past. However, I feel like this gives me a little bit better of a result when it comes to really waking these flavors up in this curry paste rather than doing it with the coconut milk and reducing it down. But not to say that that's the wrong way to do it, because that's probably a lot more traditional than this is, but I've tried it all and this just happens to be delicious. Now that the flavors of this curry paste are good and awake, I'm going to add half of this can of coconut milk, and I'm going to mix it up until it's really well mixed. This recipe only has 2 tablespoons of curry paste to the 1 can of coconut milk, which when I wrote this recipe, that was sort of in an effort to make it approachable to most people. It's not super spicy. A lot of people do like very spicy food, and you can easily add some chilies to add to the heat, and it certainly wouldn't be out of bounds to add some more curry paste, which has a ton of delicious flavors in it. But I would start with this, unless you're like, that you're really into good hot food. I would start with this recipe, and you can just kind of scale the heat to your own liking. Now that the curry paste is well incorporated into the coconut milk, I'm going to add some water, and I'm going to add the chicken, and I'm going to give the chicken a little bit of time to cook. Now earlier I mentioned that this is one of my very favorite things to eat, and that's actually true. In fact, it was the very first proper Thai dish that I ever had in my life. The very first time I went to an authentic Thai restaurant, this is what I ordered, and I fell in love with it, and I've been eating it ever since. And I actually use this still to this day as a litmus test to judge one Thai restaurant from another. And I'm fortunate enough to live in an area where we have quite a few Thai restaurants, and it's just really cool to see the variation from one restaurant to another. They may be 10 miles apart here in town, but the recipes are all, you know, coming from different areas of Thailand, so they use some slightly different ingredients. The biggest difference that I've noticed is in the vegetation. You don't always see the Thai eggplant, though you see it quite a bit. You know, and I like to use green beans and bell pepper, sometimes even onion, and you just find all kinds of different stuff in them from restaurant to restaurant, and that's the beauty of it. You know, if you don't like eggplant, use something different, preferably something that's in season and fresh, but you can make it your own. It's a really good dish. You should really try this. The chicken's looking good and done now. That took probably 7 or 8 minutes to get the chicken completely cooked through. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some sugar. Let me get a tablespoon measure here. I use coconut sugar. You don't have to. You can use white sugar if you need to, but if you have coconut sugar, it's recommended. I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of coconut sugar here. I'm going to add some fish sauce. This is one of those ingredients you need to learn to love it. It smells terrible, but don't skip it because it adds such an amazing, deep flavor to this curry. It would not at all be the same without it. So I'm going to add 3 tablespoons. And then I'm going to add some kaffir lime leaves. These could be tricky to find, I would imagine. I get them at my local Thai market, but I always give them like a quick rip. These I wouldn't eat at this size, but you can pull them out when you're done, but they lend a ton of flavor and they smell amazing. So I'm going to have these 3 things get to know my curry for the next 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to increase the heat here once I get all of these kaffir lime leaves in. And then after a couple of minutes, I'm going to add the rest of the coconut milk and then the vegetables, and we're getting there. We're almost there. Now it's time to add the rest of the coconut milk, and then I'm going to start adding the vegetables too. And all I need to do at this point is bring this to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce the heat and just let it simmer for a few minutes, and we're good. I'm going to add some basil to it once I kill the heat, and we'll be eating. So I'm going to add bamboo shoots. I highly recommend that you rinse these off. For some reason, to me, if you just use them directly out of the can, they have just a bit of an off flavor. I mean, it still tastes like bamboo shoot, but it's almost just too strong. It just highly recommend rinsing them off, especially if they're canned. And I'm going to add some green bean and the bell pepper. And last, but of course not least, the Thai eggplant. And then again, like I just said, I'm going to bring this to a boil and then reduce it down to a simmer and just let it chill for a few minutes. And once I kill the heat and add the basil, we'll be ready to eat. Alright, the vegetables all look good and pretty well fork tender now. So I'm going to kill the heat and add some Thai basil. This is delicious stuff. I highly recommend getting yourself some seeds and growing a plant in your yard. That's where this came from. But it's got a beautiful flavor. I use Thai basil as a substitute for a lot of recipes that call for basil. It's just really good. So I'm going to add what would be the equivalent of maybe about a cup's worth of Thai basil to this. And then we're going to plate this thing up and try it out. it's the moment of truth. Let's get this plated up. I'm very excited. I wish you could smell it in here. It smells so good. As a side note, you don't want to eat the kaffir lime leaves. Treat them sort of like you would treat a bay leaf, but the best way to get rid of them is just like this. They are so good. So, I'm going to garnish this with a little more Thai basil. Cilantro would be appropriate too if you're into that kind of thing. And I'm going to give it a taste. That is ridiculous. Tell you what it could use. Maybe a squeeze of lime. Try it with a little bit of this jasmine rice. What a beautiful combination. This is delicious. Make this. All right, it's time for me to wrap this thing up so that I can get in on this bowl of food. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been a lot of fun. Make this recipe. Trust me, it's fucking delicious. You won't regret it. Don't just make this recipe, but make it and leave me a comment below. Let me know what you thought of it and make it your own. Let me know what changes you made to make it better for you. But anyways, if you want to keep seeing more of this, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.